it's just all cute people like Grant Wood's American Gothic standing out in the field. We're on the cutting edge when it comes to energy. One of the highest states in terms of the amount of our electricity that's generated from windmills. I think I saw some not too far from here, but you go farther west, northwest Iowa, they're just covered with them. And they're building one now that's 360 feet tall near Corning. Just monster windmills. And then, of course, so much of our corn winds up in ethanol. And so we're one of the leaders in the alternative energy movement, which is quite something to be proud of. Now, talk about Iowa, you also have to talk about weather. They always say, you know, wait, if you don't like it right now, wait 5 or 10 minutes and it'll change. So, what's your favorite season? Now, most people say fall or spring. And not many people say my favorite season. We're in it, summer. But it never gets too hot for me. And I love to be out and about. I've never enjoyed driving around the state more than I did today. It was just such a beautiful drive with all the fields coming in with the corn and soybeans, and the trees are all leafed out. But summer's my favorite season. Does anybody like winter as their favorite season? Okay. So I said there's a smarty pants, and then there's a troublemaker. But you know what? It's very rare that anybody says winter, but people do tell me that. Now, I love to sit on the porch up at Spirit Lake and watch that lake. You know, Spirit Lake is next to Lake Okoboji, if you're familiar with that. And it's 7 miles at its longest, so I love to look out over that lake in December and watch it freezing over. You can literally see the ice build up, and then the first snowflakes come down, the last of the geese are heading south, and then I actually walk on the lake in January, and I walk across it. And it's so much fun. But by the time it's the 2nd or 3rd week of January, get me out of here. I can't stand winter. I'm just not built that way. I'm glad you are, sir. But my wife and I have been going to the same hotel and the same room in Puerto Vallarta for an extended period for 18 years. And we've got our tickets for this year and our booking already. And people say, you go to Mexico, it's just so dangerous there. And I say, I'd rather take my chances at the hands of the drug cartel than spend February in Urbandale. And so far, I have survived. Now I'm just curious, what do you think is the hottest temperature we've ever had in Iowa of all time? Since it's summer, I'll ask that first. I'll make a guess.
118.
Okay, who said 118? Oh my gosh, another smarty pants. That's it. Okay, now Keokuk, of course, is where it had to happen, but it was in the, you know, the Dust Bowl years, the 30s. My father-in-law used to always tell me about the extremes in those years and how horrible it was, especially for farming. But the winters were bad, the summers were bad, as some of you might remember firsthand. But 118 in Keokuk. And then now fast forward to 1993 or so. What do you think the coldest is it's ever been in Iowa? Not wind chill, but the coldest temperature.
48 below.
Not doing bad but you're a winter guy. 47 below in Elkader, which wasn't too far from here, right? And it was matched by Washta near Cherokee. So that is a difference of about 160 some degrees. And I think that's why so many Iowans, and especially Iowa seniors, make it to 100 and they're so healthy and active, because you can't be a sissy and survive 160 degrees difference in one lifetime. Other states are hotter, other states are colder, but think of the extremes in our state. Now, this is usually when I'd show a clip about the Luss Hills of western Iowa. Has anybody ever traveled the Luss Hills? Okay. Well, there's a Luss Hill Scenic Byway, just like there's that wonderful Mississippi Byway that you can travel. But, you know, both ends of our state have these either bluffs on the Mississippi or these pretty high hills along I-29. But the Luss Hills are so beautiful and so unique, and they're truly an Iowa hidden treasure. And some great places to go are Sidney, to Waubonsee State Park. What else is Sydney known for?
Rodeo.
The rodeo, yeah. And it may not be the biggest in the world, but it's one of the best known, and it's put on by volunteers in a small county seat town, and it's just a great rodeo. But Waubonsee State Park is a great place to kind of hike around and get an overlook of the Les Hills from down there. Or keep traveling north, as Lewis and Clark did, see the Lewis and Clark Monument in Council Bluffs, or go to Missouri Valley, has DeSoto Bend. Anybody been there near Missouri Valley? And you can see two things. In the fall, you'll see millions, literally, of Canada geese migrating along those hills in that Missouri River Flyway, but also the Bertrand Museum. And that is where a steamship sank in the 1860s on its way from Omaha to the silver mining fields in Montana. And it was loaded with all kinds of provisions for the miners as well as mercury. The guys that dug it up back in the 70s thought they were going to make all this money on the mercury. Well, that didn't work out, but everything was intact because the steamship got silted in. And so it's all on display at the Bertrand Museum, which is great. But on the Lewis and Clark front, you keep going north and you go to the Les Hills State Forest around Pisgah, and go to Preparation Canyon State Park up in that neck of the woods, and you'll get the most beautiful views and the most beautiful hiking trails to go up and down. And then go to Ottawa, Iowa, and see a replica of one of Lewis and Clark's keelboats. And you can see actually how those guys paddled upstream, I have no idea. And then of course Sioux City has the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center, and Stone State Park, which is a great park set in those Les Hills, and the Sergeant Floyd Monument, a huge, like Washington Monument. It's an obelisk, but it's dedicated to the one man who lost his life on that exposition. And when I mention in Sioux City the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center, and all those great things to learn more about the hills too, I have to mention in Dubuque, who's been to the National Mississippi River Museum. Now, you have to go down along the riverfront there and see how they've restored it, and then take the Fenelon Place inclined elevator, one of the few in the world that see that wonderful museum that tells the story of the Mississippi from all kinds of different viewpoints, from Minnesota down south. So the Les Hills in itself is a fun thing to explore. Now, let's talk about my favorite subject again, which is, there we go. How did you know? Okay. Now, just to get this out of the way, I did have a pork tenderloin on the way here at the Flaming Office in Toledo. Is that ringing a bell with anybody? I think I stumbled in the wrong place by mistake, which happens to me all the time, but it was a great tenderloin. So, I'm going to talk about some other tenderloin places. For example, who besides the St. Olaf Tap, have you been to Belmont, Iowa, to the Belmont Drive-In and had the tenderloin? Oh wow, that's a great one. Or who's been to Butch's River Rock Cafe down in Henry County near Mount Pleasant? And it's on the edge of town in an old train depot. And these people took it and made it a restaurant, and they won the Tenderloin Award one year. But you'd never know it. You're right next to the Skunk River and a dam, a pretty little park, but I think they need some more staff, because the day I went there was only one waitress. The place was packed. I sat down next to the kitchen and the cashier area, and the waitress was running her tail off. And at one point, the cook said to me, "Hey, you, take these two tenderloins over to table 7. Oh, okay. So just be prepared for that, okay? Now, if you like hamburgers, not far from St. Olaf, and we're in the general neighborhood of Spillville and Decorah, you go to Gunder, don't you? Who's had a Gunder burger? Okay. Did you eat your whole Gunder burger? Okay. Another small town with a great idea, like the Salt and Pepper Shaker Gallery. Gunder was going to be taken off the map, even the state highway map. you know, it's just a little white steeple church and a few houses and a bar, and how Kevin's Irish Shanty Bar wound up in a Norwegian town in northeast Iowa, I have no idea. And he's a hospice nurse from Boston, so go figure. But he said, I'll make the biggest hamburger in Iowa, 20-ounce hamburger. And it's actually pretty good. And if you eat your whole Gunderburger, as some of you know, you get to wear the Gunderburger hat. It's like a cheddar head hat or a Cornhusker hat. And you get your picture taken, and your picture goes up behind the bar at Kevin's Irish Shanty. So there you go. Now there's another sandwich besides the tenderloin and a hamburger that is known for. What would that be? Yes. I was halfway tempted on the way here to stop in Marshalltown at Taylor's. And I've eaten there, and it truly is the best made right. But they're not part of officially the chain anymore, because theirs is fresh ground beef, and the chain's is frozen. And there really is a difference you can taste. But Taylor's is the legendary one. But there's another place where you can get, it's called loose meat in some parts of the state, and it has another name in other parts of the state, the tavern sandwich.
Lamar's, they call it tavern.
Well, there you go, because I was the speaker at Ice Cream Days in Lamar's. Now, why do they call Lamar's? The Blue Bunny, 1 million+ gallons of ice cream a year come out of that town. Blue Bunny ice cream. And I was the speaker at Ice Cream Days, but I went to Bob's Drive-In. And Bob's is like stepping right out of the 1950s. And they had a sign up that said, Tavern Sandwich. And I said, I've never seen that before. Loose meat sandwich. But the most famous loose meat sandwich place in Iowa is in Ottumwa. Has anybody ever eaten at the Canteen? Well, if you go to the Canteen in Ottumwa, you have to know what you're looking for. Now just think it's like a 1930s or 40s Humphrey Bogart movie, and you're looking for a neon sign on a dark alley. The Canteen is this little hole-in-the-wall restaurant that's no bigger than the area the front rows are in me. And they serve loose meat sandwiches and shakes. And they're so tasty. But they were going to tear it down. Urban renewal for a parking ramp. So guess what? The town got up in arms, and the Canteen is the only loose meat sandwich place in the world that is surrounded on 3 sides by a multi-level brand new parking ramp in downtown Ottumwa. And it'll never need a new roof, and it'll never need repainting, because they made them build this huge parking ramp all around the Canteen. So know what you're looking for. Now, Iowa has so many ethnic groups. Do you know how many languages are being spoken in Iowa right now? Languages and dialects? More than 150. And it's a good thing. I mean, I'm all for mixing it up. And you go to a town like Columbus Junction, they have substantial populations of Burmese and Congolese and Puerto Ricans and Central Americans, Mexicans, and on and on. And everybody has their own great food traditions. But a lot of the traditions of Iowa were established when our state was settled in the 1800s by groups that are ancestors of, just looking out there, people that I can recognize. You came from some of these groups. Now let's get the Irish out of the way first. Who's an Irish or English person? Okay, well your place is Emmett County. And Emmetsburg, which is very highly Irish, but Irish are the second largest ethnic group in the state. And you don't have necessarily shall we say, a shrine or a museum. You have a day, March 17th, right? And everybody has a parade in any town that's of any size. And of course you have some beer and corned beef and cabbage. Okay, so now let's talk about the biggest European ethnic group in Iowa. What do you think that is? German. How many Germans? Now I'm totally German. North German and South German, but all my ancestors came from Germany. Now, have you ever been to Davenport and been to the German American Center? If you get a chance, you should go. It's a great museum in an old hotel that was on the river. And a lot of German settlers came up on riverboats from New Orleans. And that was the first place they stayed. But Davenport and Dubuque are two of the highest percentages of Germans in the nation. And there's two things you can visit in Iowa besides that museum. Ever heard of a house barn? Well, if your ancestors were German, I suggest you go to DeWitt, which is too far, is it? Or to Manning in western Iowa. They brought over these structures that date to the 1700s, but they actually started long before that, but they brought over and reconstructed these house barns that are as big as the beamed area here, I'd say, a little larger. A thatched roof made out of reeds from the Baltic Sea, and then brick and timber building with an unvented fireplace. And this is one big room, no privacy. People, hogs, cattle, beef, sheep, everybody slept and did everything under the same roof. And I guess that explains a lot about Germans. But when it comes to German food, you pick up bits and pieces of it here everywhere. I've even had it at St. Donatus. Ever been there? It's Luxembourg type food, Spätzle noodles and all kinds of good sausage stuff. But the Hessen House in Des Moines has red cabbage and all kinds of bratwurst and great German food, sauerbraten. The only thing I wouldn't do on the menu, I refused on principle, was to get the German nachos. There's something about that just rubs me the wrong way. Okay, now I'm in eastern Iowa, so are there any Czechs in the room? Well, oh my gosh. Now sometimes I don't get one single hand, and nobody will even have a part Czech background. Well, of course, Cedar Rapids and Omaha are the two highest percentages of Czechs in the nation. In fact, I took my family recently to eat at the Bohemian Cafe in Omaha, which is closing on South 13th, and we wanted to go there one last time. But in Cedar Rapids, you go to that wonderful Czech museum, and isn't it amazing how they moved it up the hillside after the floods of '08 on the river? Just the engineering feat alone. It's a great museum, and then you go to Czech Village next door, and what do you get at the bakery? Kolache, or kolach. And I know the baker there, so it wasn't too long ago I was doing some programs in that area, and I was trying to behave myself. But I went in and just wanted to get one kolache. And, you know, the classic flavors are apricot and prune and poppy seed. But I know the owner, and he said, "Oh, Dan, that's all you're going to get? I got cottage cheese and sour cream and raspberry." And okay, I walked out with half a dozen and went back to my motel room and ate them alone. What better way to cheer up? Any Dutchmen here? Okay, Pella and Orange City are your towns in Iowa. And Orange City is, of course, in northwest Iowa in Sioux County. And Pella is so famous southeast of Des Moines, about 45 minutes. And each town reflects the other one. Has a, what does it have? A college, Dutch Reformed College, all kinds of Dutch Reformed churches, Tulip Festival, great square, and bakery. And what do you get at a Dutch bakery? Dutch letters. Aren't they good? Did a program recently in Washington, Iowa, and they asked me to stop in Pella and pick up about 50 Dutch letters. And that was my pleasure because I took a whole bunch for myself. And they were so good. Now, the final groups I'm going to pick on in this part of the program is the Scandinavians. And I really am curious. I'll save the Norwegians for last. So, any Swedes? Oh, and now are you?
I'm not native Iowa, no.
Where are you from?
Kansas City.
But they're Swedish background?
I did graduate from Boxholm
okay.
over by Boone, which is
Yeah.
a very Swedish town, so we moved there. But my maiden name was Baker. I was the only one that didn't end in S-O-N.
Yeah.
So, but I did move to a Swedish town.
Interesting. Well, the fun thing is, for you Swedes, Henry County has Swedesburg. And that's one of the museums that I tried to get to from 11:30 to 11:45. It took 3 tries, but I got there. And it's a great little museum in this tiny Swedish town. And it tells the story of the settlement of the Swedes that knew how to read maps. Because they were supposed to go up, this was the 1840s, the Skunk River, and get off in Henry County. Well, guess what? The ones that couldn't read maps wound up in Boone and Boxholm and all around there in central Iowa because they took the Des Moines River. And there's all kinds of Swedes there. But one of Iowa's Swedish signatures is the town of Stanton in southwest Iowa, which has a claim to fame. Do you know what that is? The world's biggest coffee pot. The old water tower was shaped like a Tin Man's hat, like that, and it had a handle and a spout and Swedish folk painting. And it was the world's biggest Swedish coffee pot. Last year they had to take it down. So another big controversy, like the canteen in Etowah. And they resolved it by cutting it off at its knees, moving it to the town museum, putting up the new one that's shaped like most of them are now, putting a saucer under the new one and a handle, putting Swedish folk painting on it, and making it the world's biggest Swedish coffee cup. And part of this is because a very famous person came from Stanton. Do you remember back in the 70s, the Folgers commercials?
Yeah.
Folgers, that's the richest kind, is mountain-grown coffee. Virginia Christine, the actress, was from Stanton. And that's what prompted them to do that. So we have so many wonderful ethnic traditions and so many foods that relate to our ethnic traditions. And like I say, the new ones are coming on strong, and not far from me, in Urbandale, now you'll find Bosnian and Ecuadorian and all kinds of ethnic groups up the wazoo. But I was strictly referring to the classic Iowans. Now, let's just talk for a minute about some special ideas as we wind down. Mansions. I said everybody knows to go to Terrace Hill. Who's been to Claremont and seen Montauk? Isn't that a beautiful thing? Governor Larrabee, one of our early governors, built this mansion on the hilltop. His family stayed in it, and then they turned it over intact with the furnishings to the state. And so you get a beautiful view from this hilltop overlooking Claremont and the Turkey River Valley in northeast Iowa, and see the home and the grounds pretty much as they were when Governor Larrabee lived there in the 1800s. And there's a number of statues on the grounds, and one of them is a guy from my hometown of Council Bluffs, General Dodge, because Governor Larrabee had statues of a number of Civil War generals. And General Dodge was also the builder of, one of the main builders, of the Union Pacific Railroad, which at one time was in Council Bluffs, and they have the UP Museum now, but the headquarters, of course, is in Omaha now. But he had a mansion in Council Bluffs that's now called the Dodge House that you have to go to at Christmas time. And it's so beautiful the way they decorate it. And it's the same architect as Terrace Hill in Des Moines, the governor's home. So it's quite something to see. Now, we talked about hotels a little bit, and we mentioned Dubuque. Have you seen the Julian Dubuque Hotel since it's been renovated? Oh, it's just spectacular. I had no idea that gem was there. And who was one of their more famous customers over the years? Well,
The Bachelor stayed there.
well, yeah, somehow you look like you would be tuned into that. But I'm speaking to a different group of person. Who said Al Capone?
Oh,
Yes, yes. Now, I'm going to give credit to the Bachelor.
okay.
But Al Capone, when he had to get out of Chicago, and I guess he had operations in East Dubuque, was quite a wide open town in the Prohibition years. And so he would stay at that hotel, and they have a suite that documents some of that history. Go down the river to Davenport, which has so many attractions, but the wonderful hotel there, the Black Hawk, is beautifully restored too, and a number of presidents have stayed there. Or the smaller hotels around the state. Have you been to Decorah? I didn't even pick on the Norwegians yet, so I'm going to detour for 1 minute. If you're Norwegian, and I see the lady in green, and I'm so sorry.
Through and through.
I almost skipped over them. But Decorah is your town. Vesterheim Museum, beautiful tribute to the crafts and those beautiful hand-painted trunks they have. And then outside, the buildings and the cabins they lived in. And of course, Decorah also has just a beautiful setting on the Upper Iowa River. And it also has Luther College. And it's one of really the classic Iowa small towns you have to visit. But it also has the Winneshiek Hotel. So if you're into architecture, it's not Frank Lloyd Wright, but it's the Arts and Crafts School. And it's just beautifully restored and a great place to stay. Greenfield, Strawberry Point, Perry, Maquoketa, they all have these great small hotels. And you might even have one here or nearby, for all I know. Now, a couple of ideas in the museum front. And of course, you've got a great fun one up this street. But just in terms of transportation, anybody into motorcycles back in the day? Well, Anamosa, the National Motorcycle Museum, I hope you've been there. 500 motorcycles, including the one Steve McQueen rode in The Great Escape, and World War I and World War II motorcycles. Boone, I'm going to take my granddaughter this summer up to ride the Boone and Scenic Valley Railroad, one of the highest trestle railroad bridges in the nation, and a great railroad museum. Indianola, Iowa has the Ballooning Museum, and you can learn all about that. And it goes on and on. Greenfield has the Iowa Aviation Hall of Fame, and you can see a lot of planes that a gentleman collected over the years, as well as learn more about Iowans that were prominent in aviation. We were talking just a minute ago about some famous Iowans, and one was a band leader from Clarinda, Glenn Miller. They have a festival every year, and they have a great museum in his birthplace. And it's just a great place to learn about big band music. Back to Boone, Mamie Eisenhower, our First Lady, was from Boone. And her house, where she was a child, and the basement has a museum. And then also, our president, of course, I hope you've all been to West Branch and seen that modest home that he was born in. And I think his life is very inspiring, and we should be terribly proud of him, especially the way he fed all these starving people during World War I and World War II. You can learn about that. Who's our big movie star from Iowa? Well, everybody's heard about the bridges in Madison County, but Winterset is also the home of his new museum and his birthplace, and it's a great place to learn more about his career and that of a great lady that died last year, Maureen O'Hara, his co-star. And so many other famous Iowans, and I'm not going to have time to touch on many more, but Grant Wood, you can see his studio, you can see the American Gothic House in Eldon, down in southeast Iowa. You can go on the Grant Wood Trail, you can see Stone City, which I'm sure a lot of you have visited. Meredith Wilson from Mason City, Music Man Square and his house, and the great Music Man. Other people from show business like Andy Williams from Wall Lake, Johnny Carson from Corning, and Donna Reed from Denison, and they all have things you can visit in those towns if you take your Iowa travel guide with you. Well, I'm going to wrap up now with a section that actually, since I never pay any attention to the really important things, just the unimportant things that are totally insignificant, I'm going to ask you some questions about quirky Iowa. Now, who knows where the biggest statue of an Indian princess in the world is located? Pocahontas. Now, let's not get political here. She was around a long time before Donald Trump and the senator. But Pocahontas, Iowa, northwest Iowa, 15 or 20 foot tall statue of an Indian princess, and she just got a new teepee 2 years ago. And it's quite awesome. Okay, you're not that far from the biggest strawberry in the world, which is at Strawberry Point. And you go to Burlington, Iowa, in the Mississippi, a beautiful town, but also the home of the world's crookedest street. And my son lived in San Fran for a number of years, and it really is crookeder than Lombard Street. And it's a beautiful drive, Snake Alley. And it goes past some historic houses and beautiful churches in a nice part of Burlington. Did you know the biggest popcorn ball in the world is in Iowa? Well, Sac City, Iowa. And at first they came up with one that was 2,000 pounds. And then they did one that was 3,000 pounds to keep the record. And then they made one that was 5,000 pounds. House. That's the last one I saw. And they just finished their last one they say they're going to do, the 10,000-pound popcorn ball. And I went to see it, and they said, we can't get it out yet because we haven't finished the new building we're going to put it in. But when I saw the 5,000-pound popcorn ball, don't ever be tempted to break off a piece and take a bite. It was springtime, the flies had just hatched, it was covered with mold. But you know what they do when they retire a popcorn ball? Now, we talked about small towns have to make their own mark, right? Well, they tow it to the football field, fill it with explosives, and blow it up. Okay, we're not that far from the biggest frying pan in the world, at Brandon. The biggest statue of a bull in the world, Audubon. 33 feet tall, 30 feet long, anatomically correct, made out of concrete, painted like a Hereford, brown and white. Is that amazing? And it just goes on and on. So we should all be so proud. And right in your own backyard, I hope you've all been to something I tout every time I give one of these programs. Just your little neighborhood here, the biggest tree house in the world is in Marshalltown at Shady Oaks. And Mrs. Gift is still giving the tour. You have to call ahead. 12 stories tall, 5,000 square feet, a kitchen, a computer room, a TV room. It's unbelievable. Staircases. Have you ever been to the House on the Rock in Wisconsin? It's Iowa's House on the Rock. There's no corner that doesn't have something weird in it. And it's lit up at night, and it's quite amazing. Well, Gladwin, just down the road. And you should be so proud of just having that in the neighborhood, what that guy has done with his wooden matchsticks. And now, I can't use my clincher, but I usually mention your Salt and Pepper Shaker Gallery and that lady Ruth Rasmussen. I always ask people, do you collect things? Do you never get out of control? Now, when I checked today, your curator, Ellen, told me that there were 15,000 upstairs, and it's gone up to like maybe 10,000 have come in sets. But of course, having the mind I do, that area behind the wooden door that the kids can't see, those are my favorite ones. And I always get my best laugh with that. And then next time I come, I'll be able to show my last clip that I usually show. Who's been to Spillville? Beautiful, and so many of you are Czechs. That Czech Catholic Church is the oldest Czech Catholic church in the U.S. The graveyard with those distinctive iron crosses, that beautiful church, the organ that Dvorak played, but the museum with the clocks that those two bachelor brothers did, they never traveled more than 35 miles away from Spillville. Can you believe that? And they were offered a fortune for those clocks, and they didn't sell them. They almost got destroyed when the one brother died and one brother was left. He was going to destroy him. But you'll never regret it. If you haven't been there yet, you've got to see the clocks in Spillville. So that's what I'm all about, Iowa's hidden treasures.